The audience is here.
Clapping.
Yes. So, well, thanks very much for having me. Yeah, it's funny because you read that easier than I wrote it. Because it's one of those things where I've been doing this media stuff for almost 37 years now,
Wow.
and in the back of my mind, there's this little nugget of imposter syndrome. So anytime I have to do some kind of a bio or an about me thing,
Mm-hmm.
it's like because
What do I have? What am I
yeah,
going to say?
it whispers in the back of my head most of the time, but sometimes it comes out as this full-throated, Mormon Tabernacle
Yes.
Choir in a hurricane. How dare you even think that you've got enough what it takes to go?
Well,
But
it
yeah,
sounds like we have a lot to talk about.
sure.
So let's get into it.
All right.
Let's rock and roll. Let's talk about you.
Oh, that's one
Let's
of the most
talk
dull topics
No,
ever
no,
that you can come up
no.
with.
Are you first off, I love science fiction. So when you contacted me and you wanted to talk about science fiction, I was just like, oh yes, let's talk about science fiction.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
How did sci-fi for me begin?
Well, it actually started in February of 2009. The Sci-Fi Channel,
Mm-hmm.
which is now owned by NBC Universal Comcast, they had decided to change their brand and
Okay.
go from the Sci-Fi Channel to Sci-Fi with this weird spelling, the SYFY,
Uh-huh.
and a lot of people reacted to that pretty negatively. There's like they're getting away from the science fiction audience. There was a lot of frustration because it was all at that point. There were reality shows, there was scare tactics, there was cooking shows, there was wrestling still on the Sci-Fi Channel,
Right.
and people thought, okay, well, they're trying to get away from science fiction after 17 years and
Right.
become another USA Network type of thing.
Right.
And so I had the idea back then, and this is back before Netflix was streaming; it was still doing DVDs, and YouTube was still just cat videos and people falling off the roof. I thought, well, what if somebody else came up with another Sci-Fi channel
Mm-hmm.
that it doesn't necessarily have to be cable? Why can't it be online? And
Good point.
that was the beginning of the idea. So initially, the thought was for sci-fi4me.com to be this amalgam video channel, library, discussion board, commentary thread, news reviews, and all of these different things. A combination of the magazines and the town square and the movie theater and the newspaper and the radio. And if I had known then what I know now, I probably wouldn't have done it. But it's never
Why?
quite well. It's never turned out. It's never turned out exactly the way I anticipated.
Okay.
The original plan was X, and we've kind of gone off the mark to somewhere over here at green. I mean, it's completely different what I had originally envisioned. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't have any money.
Well,
So
yeah.
it's like, well, I do what I can with what I
What did
have.
you have?
So it started out as a blog in a basement, like most sites do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of evolved from there. We do news and reviews over on the .com.
Mm-hmm.
And then the video has picked up when Facebook started pushing video as the next thing, and everybody kind of got on board with that.
Right.
We pivoted over, and we had been doing YouTube since about 2012, and we really started leaning into it. We took a break in 2018 and came back really gangbusters in 2019 with about 10 different shows. And we've had various different volunteer staff over the years. I've had as many as 20 at any given time. And, basically the emphasis has been covering, science fiction, the DC comic stuff, the Marvel shows, movies, television, any of book review. I've got a book review pile that dates back probably a good 15 years now because I'm behind. But it's just one of those things that just kind of evolves and
Takes different paths.
winds a different, the long and winding road, as they say. So,
Can you share a bit about your background before launching Sci-Fi for me?
well, in terms of media, I started in college radio in 1988,
Oh,
and from there,
so
my
you've always been involved in radio.
radio was my beginning. I grew up in Dallas, and there was a radio station there, KVIL,
Okay.
which did a contest in 1988 because it was a leap year. And they said, well, we've got a leap day and we're not going to get paid anymore. So we're going to let guest DJs come in and do it.
Oh, that's cool.
And I missed the age requirement by about 3 days. And because you had to be 18. But the bug bit me. And so when I went to college, I started doing radio there and just took to it like a duck to water. And since then, I've done radio, I've done television, I've made TV commercials, I've done film, I've made short films, feature films, won a handful of awards, and then got into the podcast and got into the online web stuff. And then, when Sci-Fi changed their name, I was like, this is an opportunity. So that's how I got there. Short version.
What are some of the challenges you faced in building this Sci-Fi thing?
Money.
Isn't that always the case?
Well, and I've said on a number of occasions we talk about it in the show, there are three things that you need for any successful venture. You need money, you need manpower, and you need time. And money will get you the other two.
Right.
And as much as we've had, the various different volunteers that we've had over the years, we're subject to their availability, their interest level, because they're not getting anything out of it. They're just putting in their time as they're able.
Right.
So family considerations, jobs change, schedules change. And, we've got other obligations, and they come and go. It's a revolving door of the gang of meddling kids, as I call it. So now we don't have as many. My wife helps, and I've got a couple of other people that are contributing some articles every now and again. If I had 10 million a year, then I might be able to do what I really want to do with it. But,
which is what?
Well,
what's your pie in the sky?
Pie in the sky is to be the next Sci-Fi channel.
Okay.
Combined with Starlog magazine and Wizard magazine.
Okay.
And have both the video component, the video element, and then also the news magazine side of things.
Okay. Now, all right. One of the things that in my head is the combining of sci-fi with wizardry. See, to me, sci-fi is in the space. It's Jean-Luc Picard.
Yeah.
It's Star Trek.
Science fiction. You have fantasy, and you have horror.
Right.
And
see,
they're all cousins to each other.
Yeah, but you see, the horror, I kind of like, I'm not, no.
Well,
but sci-fi,
but Alien,
sci-fi is pure.
Sure, but Alien is science fiction, but it's also horror. It's a monster movie. It's a haunted house in space. So you have these combinations, you have these crossovers. H.P. Lovecraft.
But if it keeps me up at night, no.
Well, not everybody is, everybody wants to go for horror. So, we keep it separate, but it's all in the wheelhouse. And then the related stuff besides television and movies.
Right.
We, the books and comic books and video games and tabletop games like Dungeons and Dragons, all of that stuff falls into the wheelhouse where we're at.
Okay.
So
I know diversification is really important because
for the most, to a certain extent.
You can't just be one because you're not going to make a whole lot of money at just the one.
Well, I haven't made a whole lot of money at anything yet. So,
Well, that's true. But you're not. You have to have a full range of things. And that be able to at least interconnect them.
Well, to a certain extent, having a niche is a benefit because you're not having to divide your attention and figure out your brand identity.
True.
If I'm sci-fi for me, if I'm science fiction, fantasy, horror, that's what we do. We don't talk education. We don't talk science. We don't talk, science as it relates to things.
Right.
But we're not talking politics. We're not talking economics. We have the occasional business discussion, but it's related to the entertainment industry as it unfolds with box office numbers and that kind of thing. So we don't talk about much outside of our wheelhouse, at least most of the time. I sometimes kind of stray off into the weeds on politics stuff, but again, it comes into.
But Star Trek did. I mean, Star Trek,
Well,
they talk about the prime,
yeah, I'm
prime,
going to take
whatever it's
exception to
called.
that because people have said, "Oh, Star Trek has always been political."
It's not political
It
in
hasn't. It's been social.
right.
There are social issues, and William Shatner even made this point on Twitter, where or X, I call it Twixer now. But Shatner said, Star Trek, the original Star Trek, especially, but Next Generation also has been dealing with social issues.
Right.
Social issues don't have anything to do with party.
Right.
I can say racism is wrong, whether I'm a Democrat or a Republican,
right,
Libertarian, whatever. And that distinction gets lost in the
Right.
current year discussion. And I think when I stray into politics, a lot of that entry point for me has to do with the cultural impact of what's happening in our entertainment now.
Right.
And how a lot of our franchises have been corrupted
Right.
by identity politics, by the
Mhm.
DEI and the ESG and the I Feel Seen crowd,
Right.
and
And
the
yeah.
keyboard warriors who are willing to make all sorts of noise online about something,
Right.
but they're
And
not going to
it's-
buy the product.
Right. And it really has one is really nothing to do with the other.
Right.
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 Right. Absolutely. So how do you my brain
Sorry.
just stopped. My brain
right.
just stopped.
It's all right.
How do you balance your editorial work with your hosting from Live from the bunker?
Well, Live from the Bunker is the primary operation right now. It's our flagship show.
Mhm.
And that's most of the time it's 5 days a week. That's the primary focus on what I do. And then on the side of that, I handle all of our social media
Right.
postings and whatnot. And then I will edit the .com. Anybody who contributes an article, a news article, or a review, I'll do a couple of passes on it just to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and people are actually using contractions, and then put images and the branding around it and then post it. If I had the time between all of the different things that I'm doing, I would also be doing some deep dive articles and some think pieces and essays over there as well. But I'm spread so thin right now, it's not even funny. But
So why sci-fi? What got you to sci-fi?
when I was a kid, I don't know how old I was, but after school, preschool, elementary school, I'd get home, turn on the TV, and you watch The Adventures of Superman with George Reeves.
I remember the first time I saw I went out to see the movie
with Chris Reeve.
Right, and I walked out of the theater, and I looked up at the sky, and I was just like, "What if there really was?"
Yeah,
right. And I was just, I don't know.
And that was
I
one
want
of the
you to
few
say
times.
I was an adult.
Well, I was 8, and that was one of the few times that my mother went with us to the movies, is to go see Superman. The other times is when we went to go see Star Wars. And it's notable. Mom never goes to the movies. And she picked that up after my kid was born, because she'd go to the movies with him. But before that, it was like, break out the fine china. Mom's going to the movie. So we went to Star Wars, we went to Superman. But when I was a kid, we had Superman on TV with the old 1950s series. And I remember one time, and I don't remember the circumstances, but I remember getting home later and Superman's already off. Mickey Mouse Club is already off. So I'm flipping channels and I get stopped by this image. These two men are standing in this brightly lit, colorful corridor. And the guy on the right is wearing a gold shirt and the guy on the left is wearing a blue shirt. He's got pointed ears. So I thought, hang on, wait a minute. What is this?
What is this?
And I'm watching this and I go and I look at the TV guide, which is,
yes,
on
I know
paper.
the TV guide.
Yeah,
It's on paper.
And I see it's this thing called Star Trek. And I was hooked.
Oh.
And then after that, of course, you have Star Wars. You go in, and as soon as you get blasted with John Williams music,
tell me about it.
And then the Star Destroyer comes in and was like, this is my thing. This is what I'm going to be doing the rest of my life. I'm going to be interested in this stuff. So after that, it's it's Close Encounters, it's Doctor Who,
Yes.
it's
Yeah. Oh, I love but I love the
Firefly.
original Doctor Who.
Sure.
I don't like the one that they got going on now.
Well,
You
the
know,
one
they sometimes what bothers me so much is they'll take a show that's so wonderful, and the actors, they get bored with it, they don't want to do it anymore, whatever the reason, and they have a right to move on. I
Sure,
mean,
sure.
their careers have gotten to a point where it's a standstill, they want to move on. I understand that, but then the creators don't want to let go of a moneymaker, and they put in other people, and it's not the same, and it becomes this shadow of itself.
Doctor Who is unique in that you can keep the main character with a different actor.
Change
With the actor, well, and
I
the
don't
actor's going to
like the
change
new
again.
one.
Well, he's done after this year. This second season for Shooty, that's done. He's done.
Horrible.
He's also finished because nobody's watching that show. I could get into all sorts of things about what's wrong with Doctor Who right now. I mean, it's just, I mean, we could I've done an entire hour on Doctor Who. I mean, it's easy to do. But yeah, you get into that. It's the same kind of thing. All of these different franchises have been infected with what somebody had pointed this out on Twitter. It's a perfect analogy. All of these franchises were built by nerds.
Right.
And they've been taken over by theater kids.
Right.
And it's I feel seen, I want all the attention, put the spotlight on me, and so they put themselves into these shows. And so when you start criticizing the direction of the show, now you're criticizing them, and they take it personally.
Right.
And we have to get that out.
Right. And go back to the nerd.
Yeah, well, because we sat off to the side at the lunch table, right? And you have somebody now that expresses an interest in something that this is your thing. You're interested in D&D. Come on down. Let's go. Let's play a game. And then by the time they get in, then they look around and they say, you know what? I kind of don't like this. Let's change this, and let's change this. And by that time, it's too late.
Then the original concept and the thing that made it so neat
has been corrupted.
I
Yep.
mean, that's what happened to that's what happened with Doctor Who. That's what happened to I really loved the only time that it turned that it was okay is when it went from William Shatner to Jean-Luc Picard. Jean-Luc Picard. I want you to know that my son for Christmas one year bought me an original Jean-Luc Picard doll. Okay. Action figure. I'm sorry. Action figure. It's a doll. I don't care what you tell me. It's a doll. It is still in its original package.
It's the Mego. It's the 8-inch. Yeah. Okay.
I got it. It's in its original package. Nobody touches that doll. Nobody.
Well, see,
and I still have it.
And the thing is,
and I love it.
Jean-Luc Picard is no longer Jean-Luc Picard, because if you look at the current Picard.
They did the smart thing. They changed the captain to a different person.
Well,
they didn't try to make, not like Doctor Who.
What they did though is, you've got 7 years of Next Generation, then you've got 4 or 5 movies after that.
Right, but they changed the person.
I know, but Picard comes in now. You've got these 3 seasons that are made by Alex Kurtzman. And the first 2 seasons completely obliterate the legacy of that character and everything that comes before that in Next Generation. And now it's all political, because Patrick Stewart even came out and said, well, yes, this show is going to be about Brexit and Trump. I was like, no, don't do that.
Don't do that.
And then it took the 3rd season where Terry Matalas came in and said, you know what? Why don't we make this a Next Generation show like it's supposed to be, like the fans all expected it to be.
Right.
And that's the season that everybody considers to be a success, which is the one where they bring back the Enterprise D and they bring back all of the cast. Is this big reunion? It's the Hoopla. This is what it should have been from the very beginning. And it's the platform, the launching point for Star Trek Legacy, which Alex Kurtzman doesn't want to do, because Picard season 3 wasn't his success. It was Terry Matalas's success.
Right.
So Alex Kurtzman is digging in his heels because he's jealous, and now he doesn't want to do Legacy. But Skydance coming in to own Paramount, they're saying you're going to do Legacy or else, because they want Legacy.
Right.
And they want Terry Metalis to do it, but Terry's off doing stuff with Marvel.
Okay.
So
What about all of the women that they've had leading up in Star Trek? Like, what's her name? No, in
Janeway,
yeah, Janeway.
she appeared in the animated show Prodigy.
Right.
There is
now
a
they did-
rumor about a new Janeway live action series similar to what they're doing with Picard, which
Uh-huh.
now nobody wants to see because as long as Alex Kurtzman is involved, they don't want to have anything to do with it.
Oh,
So that's
we
a
are going to
problem.
go to Jason. It's been wonderful chatting. I'm so excited. I've got to
We just
maybe
get carried
5
away.
of my questions, and that's it. But we are going to be going to station break in
Sure.
a couple of seconds. And wait a
This
minute, I
happens
need
to me all the time too. I've got a countdown timer on my control panel.
I just can't
and I
believe
miss the
this.
break every single
Yeah,
time. It's like,
I
oh
mean,
yeah, I got to take a break.
Yeah. So Jason, we are tossing to Jason Hunt from Sci-Fi for Me.
Yes,
I got that right.
most of the time.
You are an let's see, I'm gonna go to my station break and then we're
Okay.
gonna go to his station break. Are you an author, publisher, editor, illustrator, songwriter, or artist looking to expand your reach? Advertise on Author's Edge to connect with passionate readers and industry insiders. With engaging interviews, reviews, and discussions, your book will shine. Why choose us? Reach thousands of book lovers, boost sales and visibility, target impactful ads, trusted host endorsements. Elevate your presence with Author's Edge. Contact us today at 573-714-1352, where authors and readers meet. Jason will be right back, and we're going to commercials.
El Potro Restaurant and Market, located at 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland, offers the finest variety of Mexican and Central American groceries and goods. El Potro Restaurant serves authentic Mexican and Central American cuisine, including daily specials, not to mention the best horchata and tastiest margaritas in St. Louis. Open 7 days a week. El Potro, 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland.
Jewels on Hampton in St. Louis Hills is paying some of the highest prices on gold, silver, diamonds, semi-precious colored stones, coins, flatware, and fine watches on site. Jewels on Hampton is a premier jeweler featuring Alvanza's jewel art designs with an exquisite selection of diamonds, semi-precious stone jewelry, and vintage watches. Their expert design team can restyle your jewelry to today's contemporary style. They also do jewelry and watch repair. Need extra cash? Jewels on Hampton is paying some of the highest prices on gold, silver, diamonds, semi-precious colored stones, coins, flatware, and fine watches. Bring in your collectibles and clocks, sports memorabilia, and figurines too. Jewels on Hampton, 4506 Hampton, just 3 blocks south of Chippewa. Call them at 314-752-5000. 314-752-5000. Jewels on Hampton.
And we're back. You are listening to Author's Edge, coming to you weekly on Saturdays at 8 a.m. and Sunday at 7 a.m. on KWRH929.com, KXOK102.com. And today we are chatting with Jason Hunt about his website, sci-fi4me.com, covering science fiction and fantasy and horror with news, reviews, and commentary. And we are going to talk about his latest book.
Well, it's not
Hero?
latest.
It's not the latest, but it's a book.
It's about 15 years old by now.
Oh, it's 15 years
Yeah,
old.
it's
So when
it's
are you?
been a while.
Well, we're going to talk about this one, and then we're going to talk about the next
We'll
one
talk
that you're
about the
doing.
next one, Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
and it's called The Hero at the End of the Rope. Tell us about that.
Well, this started out as an experiment in flash fiction.
And what is flash fiction?
Flash fiction is a complete self-contained story in less than 1,000 words.
Ah,
And, novels are generally 40,000 words or more, or 100,000 words. You get novellas that are in a certain range. Flash fiction is you've got just a teeny tiny sliver of a gap to tell your full story. And Dayton Ward, who writes Star Trek novels, he lives in Kansas City. He had posted at one point that he had been invited to contribute to a horror anthology of flash fiction. And that got me thinking, okay, well, I'm not horror, but I've never really tried the flash fiction stuff. Let's see if I can do it. And I couldn't because when I got to 800 pages, or 800 words rather, it was like, okay, well, this is chapter 1 then. Yeah, and then just kept going. But in keeping with the spirit of that, every chapter in this book, except for the last one, every chapter is 800 words.
Okay.
So you learn, economy of scale. You learn how to finesse, word choice and how you say things. And it was an interesting exercise that kind of, helps with the craft. The final chapter is 666 words, which in retrospect kind of fits with what happens in that chapter. But the whole thing was a pretty satisfying, experiment for me.
Right.
And, self-published. I've sold maybe, I don't know, 34, 35 copies in the last.
Can we find
12
that on
It's
Amazon?
on Amazon. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's a softbound book and print on demand, and then on Kindle. And then,
And what's the premise of the book?
well, your main character, Richard Thorpe, is a guy who just wants to be left alone because he's got stuff in his past that he doesn't really want to talk to anybody about. He's a freighter pilot, and his past catches up to him when a nemesis shows up. He's basically on the run because people think that he blew up a planet. And he's just kind of keeping to himself, keeping on the down low, just not going to bring any attention to myself. And then things kind of blow up and go from there. So now he's having to deal with the repercussions of that.
Blew up a planet.
Allegedly.
Allegedly blew
Yeah.
up a planet.
Yeah, destroy a planet.
So this is a
This is
sci-fi.
science. Yeah, it is science fiction. Yeah,
Okay.
there's a cyborg in it. There's aliens in it.
The
There's
cyborg.
space travel.
Oh, I like cyborgs.
Yeah, and she's got red hair.
And
So,
she's got.
it's
Well, I
even better.
see from the. I like your cover.
It's
very,
inspired by Saul Bass. The Saul Bass movie posters that he did, like with Vertigo.
Uh-huh.
I took a riff from that, and
I like the
decided to
cover
do
a
it.
lot. It's very interesting.
so that was that. And I've had people have said nice things about it, and that's Blight. But then
Yes,
imposter syndrome monster
Yes.
rears up and says, nah, it's just okay. So yeah, I haven't done anything since as far as writing, just because time gets away from you. You get your obligations with family and job
Right,
and work and
right.
all of that. And my wife now says has said for a number of years now, you should start writing again.
You should.
And so I've got this idea now that I'm working on. It's a time travel story.
Oh, I love time travel.
And it hinges on the bootstrap paradox, which is you went back and meddled in time because you went back and meddled in time. It's one of these
The
causality
loopy.
loops where
It's a loop.
So it's called Time Ghost, and our protagonist, he goes back in time by accident, realizes I'm back in time, decides I'm going to stay to myself and not do anything. And because he doesn't get involved, it changes the timeline. So he realizes that his actual history, his actual timeline is the product of tampering that he did. So now he's got to go back and interfere where he didn't before in order to restore the timeline. So I'm kind of leaning in because the bootstrap paradox is one of those things where, like, you did this thing because history said you did this thing. It's the loop.
The what if?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
So I'm leaning into that. And then I'm also working on a book called Liberty Lovejoy's Pleasure Palace, which is an entry in a series of books. Liberty Lovejoy, Intergalactic Space Babe, is the lead character. And she's kind of this combination Bond girl Barbie in space. And
Does she wear pink?
Yeah, I haven't quite got that far yet, but yeah, she's blonde. And
Okay.
the first book that's in this series called Bikini Hijack, and what ends up happening, how she ends up out there is, she's taking a break from college.
Okay.
She's thinking, okay, engineering or cosmetology. She's very smart.
Engineering or cosmetology. What a dilemma.
She's on the beach, and this spaceship crashes in the water in front of her. So of course she's got to go out because she's a lifeguard, and she goes out and she rescues these two aliens that are coming out of this thing, and they're like, "You're perfect. You're who we were looking for." And so they grab her and they put her on the ship and they go out, and they have learned English by watching all of our television transmissions over the years. And so they figured out that the reason that she's
this
the
a
perfect
comedy?
wife- well, it's in the spirit of Douglas Adams.
Okay.
So the reason they decide that she's the one they're looking for is because she's in the red bathing suit because they've been watching Baywatch. It's like, oh, you're the hero. You're the good guy. You can come help us overthrow our oppressive government and set up this new thing. So that's how the first book starts. And there's going to be a number of different ones, but it's just one of those things. I had the idea about 25 years ago and have never done anything with it. And so now it's just kind of, well, okay, you got to get back on the horse and do some stuff.
Yes, you do. You need to
So.
get on board. So what advice do you give to sci-fi writers?
Read as much as you can,
Okay.
and not just other science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
One of the problems that we've got right now in our entertainment media is the fact that so many creators are not literate. They're
Tell
not
me
familiar.
about it.
Dickens, Shakespeare, Thoreau.
Please.
Read everything that you can read,
Please.
and don't just sit at the altar of Joss Whedon or Harry Potter. I mean, I know Harry Potter is problematic right now because J.K. Rowling is evil, but the idea here, the only things that these people know, the Tumblr crowd, the I Feel Seen crowd, especially
Right.
Harry Potter and Twilight. Like, you have 1,000 other things that could inform your storytelling. The other thing that I recommend is a book called Story by Robert McKee.
Mm-hmm.
It is a brilliant explanation of everything that you need to know about writing
Say that
a
Story
Story
by
by Robert McKee. And then The Hero with 1,000 Faces from Joseph Campbell. Those two books are critical to any writer's library. After that, anything else, add to it as much as you can. Philosophy, science, art, history, everything.
Without a doubt. That's one
Writers have to be Renaissance people. They have to
Exactly.
be able to pull, because they say write what you know. Well,
But if you
that's
only
very
know
limiting.
a narrow amount, then
very
how do
limiting,
you
yeah.
pick from that?
Exactly. Yeah. And if somebody's deciding, well, maybe I can write a story, and he's a plumber,
That story's going to be pretty boring
Yeah.
if that's all you're going to be writing about.
but at the same time, it's interesting because there's been a discussion online recently about the lack of literary fiction targeted to men.
But that's always been a problem. Even
Well-
when my son was little, I
Yeah.
had a hard time finding books that would address boys.
Mhm,
If you,
mhm.
I mean, because I really wanted our son to be a reader.
Yes.
Okay. And they would have, classrooms would have all kinds of books, but they were always girl oriented. And I am
Well,
a reader.
The other thing,
And it used to drive me crazy.
yeah, and the other discussion that's been on recently has been about The Great Gatsby in particular, and how boring that book is. And it didn't gain any popularity until some organization decided that it was a bestseller and it needed to be in the school curriculum. And English classes have come under fire because when you're in an English class and you're made to read this book, and it's one of the most boring books that you've ever read in your life. I mean, The Great Gatsby is not as boring as Moby Dick.
Oh,
But-
yes.
I mean,
And
I
you're
don't
talking to a teacher.
I don't know how you can sit and take 20 chapters to describe the ocean. You just stop.
I know.
I get it. It's wet. Go and tell me your story.
Right.
So you go and you experience these things in a forced setting where you don't get a choice of what books you get to read. You have to read this one. You have to read Silas Marner. You have to read Great Expectations. You have to read The
However,
Good Earth.
all right. Now I am an English teacher by trade,
Mhm.
39 years of it. Okay. I did manage to get kids to love Shakespeare. And I
you can
did
do
get
that.
to manage to get kids to love Edgar Allan Poe. A lot of it is on how you present it.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
If you sit there and say, now, children, we're going to read Romeo and Juliet,
Yeah.
then you're right. Nobody's going to like it. But if you say, now, sweetie, we're going to read about thrusting swords and we'll talk about how and what we are thrusting,
What-
then they're going to love it.
When I was in 6th grade, we had an assignment where the class we had a radio show that we read,
Mm-hmm.
and for the life of me, I have not been able to find it since. It was the way I remember it. It was produced by the Mercury Theater on the Air, Orson Welles outfit,
Uh-huh.
and I haven't been able to find it. But it was about this alien that came to Earth to visit and encounter and met with
Right.
people and whatnot. And there were about 30 kids in the class, and we all took parts. And I played the alien the first day, and gave him an accent and did a voice and did the character
Right.
and all that, like you do with your, well, it's radio. It's a radio play. I'm going to play a character. And the next day they wanted me to do it again because everybody else switched up. And you do things like that to make it fun, to make it enjoyable. Of course,
Right.
it's about an alien that comes to Earth. It's
Right.
not Pip looking for money and
But if
Miss
you do
Havisham
it
or anything.
right,
If you do it right, you can absolutely lock people into enjoying reading.
if you talk about Miss Havisham and the fact that she is Looney Tunes,
Right.
okay, walking around in a dress that is older than God, and the cake is sitting there and it's rat infested,
Yeah.
then the kids are going to say, "Oh, can I read that?"
Yeah. Or
Okay.
you start in with like A Christmas Carol. It's a ghost story.
If
This is a
right.
ghost story. And
If you pick up the
It's how
things
you
that you
present it.
know kids are going to be attracted to, A Tale of Two Cities. If you talk about the fact there's a guillotine in there,
Mhm.
can you
Mhm.
find it?
Yeah.
Then they're going to want to read it.
Yeah.
But if you go in and you say, now, students, we're going to read,
The additional challenge now, though,
is
is
social media.
It's twofold. Well, social media is one of them.
Mhm.
Social media, social engineering, social media.
yeah, social engineering.
That's one thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have the attention span of a gnat if
Absolutely.
you're younger than 25. I mean,
Yeah.
those kind of things do come into
Right.
play. But at the same time, the other challenge to that is the people that are in charge right now. And when you talk about men's literary fiction, traditional publishing is dominated by women, agents, editors,
Right.
the acquisitions people. All of them are women.
right.
And so, you've got people that are
But
taking
even when it was
photographs.
dominated by men, you still didn't have a whole lot of men literature
Well,
out there.
I mean, Updike, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and
Yeah,
and that
but
group.
the
But
books
lately,
themselves,
the books themselves. Well, you have a lot of that went into science fiction. The pulps, and Bradbury and Asimov, and now you've
I
got
love
the stuff
Asimov.
that's published at Baen Books. You've got the Honor Harrington series. You've got John Ringo, John Wright. You've got
Right.
Eric Flint. But men's literary fiction, like Great Expectation, not
well,
not
you
Great
have a lot of
Expectations, but-
rom com going on too now.
yeah,
which is
but that's
kinda-
all chick lit. It's you go in there and the cover art on this stuff
Oh.
is garbage. It's all generic. It's some text and some color and maybe a silhouette of shape. This is all boring.
It is.
Why would I want to?
No
Why do I
argument.
pick this
no
up?
argument from me.
Yeah.
No argument. Do you think it's better for new authors to be self-published or go traditional?
You can do both because the challenges are the same. If a traditional publisher will pick up your book,
Mhm.
you as the author
And you are
still
self.
this is self-published. Yeah.
Mhm.
You as the author still have a majority of the heavy lifting that you've got to do in order to promote it. I was talking to Ann Crispin about this a long time ago. She, Star Trek writer, Star Wars and such. And back in the late 90s, early aughts,
Mhm.
there was this shift because when the publishers got a hold of a book they thought was a hot property, they would put money into promoting it.
Right.
You'd have book trailers and you have the book tours and personal appearances
But
and the
now-
signings and all of that. Nowadays, it's more on the author to set all that up.
That's a big problem.
Yeah,
too.
it is, and because it costs a lot of money, and you for
and you don't
for
have
whatever
the connections as well.
you
Not
don't.
just
You
the
don't.
money; it's also the connections. You don't know who to talk to. You
Yep.
don't know if you contact the radio station or you contact the TV or you contact whomever. You don't know who to talk to, and they're not reluctant. They're not overly willing to give you the time because that's money.
Yeah.
To put you out there for a book they're not real sure about.
Well,
because
and
they
you
don't
could
know
put
who you are.
well, and the other problem too, and I've seen this discussion take place, for a number of years now. The fact that you've got somebody like Patrick Tomlinson or George R. R. Martin who are sitting on series that haven't been finished yet.
Right.
David Gerald has a series. He's got that last book that's never going to come out, and so people are reluctant to even start. And with fantasy and science fiction, if I see that this is a series, I want to wait till it's done. And if it's never done, I'm never going to pick it up.
Right.
And that's a problem. And
Right.
so, there's a lot of different things that factor into that. But you can get into various different PR press release websites where you can get an account and you can generate a press release for free and it'll blast out to various different places. But the other aspect of that is who's going to pick it up.
Right.
And who's going to respond to it, and then what do you do after that? You've got to have a press kit. I did a whole show on this. If you're an author, these are the things that you have to have. You need a headshot. You need you need a biography. You need a press kit. You need this, that, and the other, because so many of the
Putting those
authors
things
that I
together
interview
is time consuming, and
Yeah.
not just that, but they're difficult.
they are
because
they
you're
are.
not really sure what the heck you're doing.
Right. I mean, the case in point, the bio that I gave to you.
Right.
I mean, I've written those before, so I kind of know what my nomenclature, what my boilerplate is.
Right.
But for somebody who's never done it before,
What do I do?
where do I start?
Where do
What
I
do I
start?
do? And so many authors that I've interviewed are brand new.
Right.
This is their first book or their second book in the series or whatnot. And they don't have any of this stuff. Do you have a headshot? I need a headshot for the video thumbnail. And they'll send
they
me
think-
some snapshot off their phone. I was like, no. I need a
Yeah.
headshot. I need a
A
professional.
real professional.
It doesn't
headshot.
have to be, a professional photographer you spend
You can
$5,000
go to
for.
JCPenney's and get one.
Well, even then, just get have your friend get him some decent light,
Mhm.
stand in a window or something and have your friend snap a picture. As long as it's straight and in focus
Right.
and you're dressed professionally, that's your author photo.
Right.
Go out to the park, stand in front of a rose bush or something and snaps. There needs to be something clean, in focus, framed up that you can send out to people and say, this is what I
And
look like.
people want to see a picture of the author
Yes.
of the book. And I have writers that I am trying to convince to put their picture on the book, and they're saying, why?
Well, and you have to have good cover art too.
Yes.
Without good cover art, nobody's ever going to even pick it up.
No, they're not.
No.
They're not. What role do conventions and festivals play in a writer's career?
Every single one that you could get to.
Yeah.
It depends. I mean, there are literary conventions and there are Hollywood conventions,
Okay.
media conventions. San Diego Comic-Con, for one,
Okay.
started out as a comic book convention and gradually got taken over by Hollywood. It's now a media convention more than it is a comic book convention. We maintain on our website. This gives me an opportunity to pimp the site.
And your website again
The
is?
website, sci-fi4me.com. If you go up and you click on the conventions tab,
Okay.
that we have
I took a look at your website.
we have an
Wonderful.
alphabetical list of every Comic-Con in the world. And right now that list is sitting at 3,613.
Wow.
Those are active events that are still going on somewhere in the world throughout the year. So, Kansas Comic-Con, Planet Comic-Con, St. Louis, St. Louis has got a couple of things. Fan Expo Dallas, Fan Expo Philadelphia, San Diego Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, all of these
Do
different
you go to
things.
these?
We used to. We've gone to a few over the years, gotten in as media and press
Mhm,
and whatnot. Since we're now limited footprint on what we do, we haven't done, post-COVID, we haven't gone anywhere.
Right.
Because that killed our next model.
Ah.
We were starting to move into a model where we would broadcast from the floor of the event.
Oh,
We did it at Worldcon. We're the only website that's ever done it from Worldcon, which is where they do the Hugo Awards. We did it at Planet Comic Con one year, and we've done it a couple of other places. And then the pandemic killed everything.
right.
And since then, all of these websites are like, well, we can't do anything in person. We all do it online. And then you get into that same situation like you do with TV commercials,
Right.
where your client suddenly has this thing called iMovie. Well, I can just make my own TV commercial and I don't need you. And so,
Right.
we're kind of left out in the cold. So we had to pivot off of that. And eventually I think maybe we might get back into doing some
Mhm.
convention coverage, but I have to get through my process of deciding that I want to be out among people again. I was like, do I really want to take the time and do the effort to be around people again?
I understand that.
Yeah.
I do understand
Because
that.
post-pandemic, people are people, but something broke when we all went under house arrest. So
I think so too.
Yeah.
I really do. How can writers make their work more accessible to a wider audience?
well, see, that's a weird that's not an easy question to answer, because you have, depending on the subject of the book, your audience is going to differ. If you're writing a science fiction, adventure out in space, Starship Troopers type, as opposed to, Call of Cthulhu, this monster under the university type of thing. You have to have a social media presence. As much as I hate to say that, you have to have a social media. A lot of authors now are doing YouTube and having discussions about the process, about the craft of writing, about
Mhm.
what they're going through. A lot of comic book creators especially are doing this, because they will put a camera on their workbench and they will draw on camera, so you can actually see the work that they're doing. Authors don't really have that kind of
Right.
of thing that you can show, here's my progress, but you can talk about your process and designing art, cover art and that sort of thing. But even just having conversations with people about various different topics, news topics, is stuff that's going on nowadays, going out to, I just saw Snow White, let me tell you what I think, those
Right.
kind of things. You have to build that audience in the social media
Yeah.
in order to take them and pivot them into, okay, now I have this book that I'm going to do, or I'm going to get this comic book or something like that. You have to build in your audience and bring them along with you, and then you have your product.
How can an aspiring author use media platforms like Sci-Fi for Me to gain exposure?
We will consider any book for review. I mean, a
Okay.
lot of that is, contacting us and say, hey, I'm an author.
Does it
I
have to
get
be a
this book.
sci-fi fantasy? Does it have to
Sci-fi,
fit in?
fantasy, and horror. It has to fit into our wheelhouse. I mean, I recently got an email the other day from somebody offering me a book that was co-written by Senator Phil Gramm about capitalism, and an analysis of modern day capitalism. I was like, that would be great. I mean, sure, I could sit and talk for an hour with Senator Phil Gramm, but but it's not our thing. It's not what we do. I've got one PR agency that keeps sending me stuff, talk about this person about hospitality stuff. The Super Bowl's coming up, and how are you going to play in your party? I was, thank you. No, that's not our thing. And I'll send them a note back. It's like, look, we're science fiction, fantasy, horror. If you've got anybody in that, send them my way.
Right.
But a lot of it is, the legwork you got to do is to find the websites that are doing the reviews, whether that's on YouTube or Rumble, Odyssey, wherever the video platforms are, or the .coms, your blogs. And a lot of that is going away too. A lot of these genre websites that got built up in the 90s and the aughts, and they got bought by the corporations.
Right.
The bottom's falling out on all of those. All the advertising money's gone, all the ESG money's gone, all the DEI money's gone. It's, the venture capital stuff, all of that's gone. And then you have lawsuits like what happened with Gawker and Hulk Hogan, going after
Right.
that completely collapsed that whole group of websites. And now there's going to be another lawsuit that's probably going up against Geo Media and Kotaku for slander and defamation. And, it's all of these different cultural threads are coming together at once, Gamergate and Comicsgate and the Hugo Awards and Sad Puppies and Me Too and Occupy Wall Street, all these different things. And we're sitting here in this convergence of all of these events.
Uh-huh.
And there's this massive paradigm shift in the audience where I'm Kelly Sue DeConnick was doing an interview a few years ago because she was writing Captain Marvel for Marvel Comics. And she said this one sentence that has become the linchpin for everything. She says, if you don't like my politics, don't buy my book. And everybody went, okay. And if there's any hint of political or ideological agenda in anything, people just stay away. And now, if you're a new author and you've got this book and you want to promote the book, you have to do it in a way that doesn't flip those triggers and say, oh, well, this is going to be, X and so, political, ideological,
Right.
identitarian, or whatever. So there's that extra hurdle that you've got to get through instead of just, hey, I wrote a book. I wrote a book and it's not going to preach at you. Yeah, that you have to have that extra little bit in. But a lot of these websites, they're looking for the stories that preach at you. And that's why they're losing money. And that's why the whole bottom has fallen out of the entire industry. So
Wow.
the next 5 years, especially, I think, are going to be very rough for entertainment, for Hollywood, for the video game industry. The comic book industry has already collapsed. 73% of sales are now Japanese manga instead of Western comics. DC and Marvel are, Diamond Distributors, which distributes the comic books to all
Right.
of the different comic book shops, they've just filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They're gone. There's a new company that just bought the assets, so we don't know what's going to happen with that. But the comic book industry is in free fall. And a lot
my.
of it is because everybody got political.
Oh my gosh.
And if you don't like my politics, don't buy my book. And across the board, video games are doing the same thing. The movie industry is the same thing. If you don't like the girl Ghostbusters, you're a sexist. And that's kind of where it started. And, the new Charlie's Angels, Elizabeth Banks came in there and said, well, anybody that doesn't like this movie is probably going to be some sexist misogynist thing. And then the movie doesn't do any good. And she's like, well, where did everybody go? Well, you drove them away. Not for you. And so they don't show up. And then you whine and complain. It's like, well, why didn't anybody show up? Well, you told me it wasn't for me. So I stayed home. That's where we're at right now.
Oh my gosh. So what are some emerging genres in science fiction, fantasy that you find exciting?
Well, I don't find it exciting, but the current thing in fantasy is this thing called romantasy.
Romantasy?
Which is romance fantasy. It's a romantic fantasy. I guess if you would combine, if Harlequin romances published The Princess Bride, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
And
That's not too bad.
Well, I mean,
I like Princess Bride.
with heavy leaning on the Harlequin side of things. I think it would be, that's where we're at with romantasy. I mean, I've seen photographs of the end caps at the bookstores, and you'd have a good dozen books, and they're all about romances with the beast. Here's this romance with the vampire. Here's
So
this
it's like
romance
Beauty
with
and the Beast, but sci-fi?
Well, science fiction, fantasy, yeah, and the science fiction side of things, there are, I guess you could say there's two categories. You got military science fiction, you get the stuff that Bain is publishing, and then you got the stuff that Tor is publishing. And Tor is more into the identitarian, I feel seen, my representation, feminist, lesbian, girl boss, hero type of thing. This is not for you. I won't buy the book. And then Bain is a lot of military fiction, a lot of alternate history type of thing.
Okay.
So there's still, there's still enough product out there for anybody who's interested in it. But as
Okay.
far as trends go, the romantasy thing is probably the one notable, even though it's probably not noteworthy and not of very high quality. I'm not interested in it at all because I'm not the target market for that.
Okay.
Obviously.
Real quick, because we only have 3 minutes left. One, if you could visit any fictional world, what would it be?
Ooh.
Really fast.
I don't know that I could come up with that one. Maybe Florin or Gilder, from The Princess Bride. I don't know that I would I have a particular one that I get, because there's so many different ones. You could go to Coruscant, you could go to Alderaan, you could go to Earth in the 23rd century for Star Trek. There's a lot of different
I would
places.
want to go to the to the 25th century of Star Trek, where one world.
Yeah. See, the thing about it is, though, that's a pipe dream, because
but
that
it's
whole
such a
thing is
wonderful-
based on a post-scarcity
I know.
reality
I know.
that I don't think we're ever going to have.
You don't think so?
No.
Oh, don't burst my bubble.
Well, because we haven't solved the energy problem yet.
I know.
So,
Oh, Jason, it's been wonderful chatting with you.
thanks for having
Fascinating.
me.
Has it been fascinating conversation? Before we wrap it up, where can our listeners find you on Sci-Fi for Me?
Sci-fi4me.com. That's with the number 4. And then on socials, we're on, I guess video platforms. We're on YouTube. We're on Odyssey. We're on Rumble. We're on Twitter. X, Twixer, Twix, X. And then social media, we're on Facebook. We got a page on LinkedIn, MeWe, Minds, Gab, Locals, Getter, Parlor.
Okay.
So any of those
And
places.
Live from the Bunker?
Live from the Bunker is on at 1 p.m. Eastern most weekdays, and generally is an hour to 3 hours. And then I make appearances on various other programs on YouTube and Rumble.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Author's Edge. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, we appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to check out Jason's work at Sci-Fi for Me and subscribe to Live from the Bunker for more great conversations. We'll be back next week with more tips, resources, and engaging discussions. Our next guest will be Sharon Kizer-Holmes from Paperback Press, LLC. Until then, see you around the inkwell.